Well, when I'm not busy organising the dinner, what I do for my work is work with mines and mining companies that are basically struggling and trying to get their risk and safety practices to get better traction on the ground. So finding ways to help them implement things, and the end game being obviously to stop injuries, but primarily the stuff I look at is stopping those injuries that have the potential to become fatalities. So trying to draw that differentiation between the paper cuts and the sprained ankles and the near misses and the broken fingers or whatever that could have become fatalities. And today I want to talk a little bit about that, but a little bit also about leadership and how it affects safety. But to start off, I've added just a bit of a slide here. Something I was reading just yesterday is a report by Deloitte on mining safety, and they had a bit of an interesting spin. There's some pretty good research in there, and I'm happy to forward around to anyone that's interested. But they talked about one of the ways to improve safety was to focus on quality mining, not on the safety itself. So worry about doing things right, doing the mining right, and getting things to work properly, and the safety will sort of flow out of that rather than worrying about safety all the time and focusing on safety itself. I thought it was an interesting concept. What they talked about as well was when they used the term, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And I thought that was interesting when we think about medical treatment and LTIs and all the things we measure. We know that when we start to measure them, we start to also try and fiddle them and make the measures work. And the way they put that was when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. I thought that was a good turn of phrase. So I wanted today to talk about leadership and how it leads to safety in production. I want to use an example from a project I worked on, not when I was a consultant, but when I was actually in a production role a few years ago now, where we did some interesting things around leadership at an underground coal mine in New South Wales, and talk about the benefits that had. Okay, a bit about myself. Well, the story I want to share and the project I want to talk about was at a coal mine I worked at about 5 years ago. When I first arrived there from Queensland, this mine was lagging in safety and in production, and the reason for that was just generally pretty poor leadership practices, a huge divide between management and the workforce. People were sort of disengaged, they were uninterested, and we had a lot of frontline supervisors because of statutory requirements, a lot of frontline supervisors in roles that they didn't want to be in. They didn't want to be in leadership roles, they wanted to be in basically statutory supervision roles. The story I'm going to tell and the project I'm going to talk about doesn't end with me riding off into the sunset as the hero. We did, however, do some interesting things and made some good headway in terms of safety and production. So there's three parts to my talk. First we're going to talk about leadership. I'm going to talk about the fact that you can learn it. It can be something that people can learn over time and through a number of different ways, and that you can then observe it and track it and monitor it to make sure that the leadership behaviours that you want are actually happening at your mine or your company. So leadership, well, where are we at? Well, I see that there's three key factors, and I guess these are more Australia-wide than perhaps Victoria-focused, but there's really three things that are driving the people side of the mining industry going forward, and those are obviously the boom. We've had 120% growth in 10 years, which outstretches nearly even China's economic growth in terms of percentage. We know how much headlines that makes, and doesn't appear to be stopping anytime soon as far as the boom's concerned. We've got the skills shortage. Australia-wide, we're anticipating needing 77,500 more people in the mining industry in the next 4 years, which is actually 40% of the current workforce. There's only about 160-something thousand in the current workforce. And that's on top of, we've already had a 60% growth in numbers in the industry over the last 5 years since we were at the bottom there. I guess Victoria, the forecast I saw today, even in Victoria we're looking at 4% year-on-year growth in numbers of people in the mining industry. I guess the gold price is obviously going to have a big impact on that. But the skills shortage, and the third one being the ageing workforce. So again, Australia-wide, we're looking at 7% of the workforce retiring in the next 5 years, and in the next 10 years, 16%, or nearly 1 in 5 of the workforce retiring. And replacing those retirements is even in addition to the numbers there on the last slide. I guess my point though about the number of people that I've got leaving the industry though is the end of the leadership and experience spectrum that they're leaving from. It's the people who are most experienced and perhaps in our management and leadership positions make up a lot of those numbers for the people that are facing retirement. So where has this left us? Well, it's basically left us in a position where we're having to promote people earlier, a lot earlier, into supervisory positions and onwards. And people without necessarily the extensive experience or the training in the leadership skills that they might need in those roles. A recruitment company called DDI did a study and they looked at leaders who'd been recently promoted into their positions, and they asked them about why did they get offered the promotion and also why did they take the promotion. And what they found was that half of the leaders that they surveyed got promoted to leadership positions that had for reasons that had nothing to do with their leadership skills. The reasons they got promoted were because it was rewarding their expertise in the role, were because of their educational background, because they asked, or simply because there was no one else to fill the role. And I'm sure we can think of examples of that at our own operations. On the flip side then, they asked those people who got promoted, well, why did you take the promotion? Why did you take the leadership role up in the first place? And more than half of them said they took it up for the money. Only 1 in 4 of those newly promoted leaders said they actually took that leadership position because they wanted to lead people. More than half said they did it just for the money. Now I think in the mining industry, and I guess in my experience, we have a tendency to promote people, particularly at the supervisor level, but even into the middle management ranks, to promote people based on being the best at the skill set of the team they were in. So they were the best truck driver, and now they're the production supervisor. And I think when we look at that and combine that sort of thought with those results of that study, and then we add in all the new complexity and all the new systems that we have to deal with at our mines, all the different new reporting structures and legislation, all the different new things that supervisors have to do, we're putting a heap of load on these potentially inexperienced supervisors and leaders who were also potentially promoted for the wrong perhaps main reasons. And how do we see this in our operations? Well, it's evidenced by things like poor communication. We see supervisors not going and focusing on supervising the high-risk activities, not focusing their efforts on making sure those are being managed well. We see not enough time and maybe not enough willingness to address poor behaviours in the workplace. On the safety side, we see a lack of hazard identification as a key part of a job step. So we don't see people identifying their hazards well enough. We see paperwork that's being done at the crib room at the end of shift instead of being done on the job and with people actually looking at the hazards. We see safety programs that just don't get the traction that they should, big money spent and no results. What we want is we want our leaders to be what I call effective leaders. And what do I mean by effective leaders? We mean we want them to be doing the right things. And then as a result, we want them to be getting more done. More from themselves and more from their teams. What we typically have now though is our supervisors and our kind of middle managers stuck doing 3 main things. Spending nearly all their time doing administration, fighting fires, and then what little time they have left gets diverted to special projects, improvement projects and risk assessments and all those other sort of things. That's what they get stuck doing. When what they really want to be doing, why they probably took the job in the first place, even if they took it because they were the most skilled operator, is they want to be directing and helping and getting to know their team and teaching their team. If they were the best loader driver, they want to be teaching the new loader drivers in their team what they know. But instead, they're caught up in those other 3 activities. So if we can help them to do these things, then in the end, what we're hoping to do is have more effective leaders who can simply get more done. We're all good there, Ben?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you think so?
I think so. I've got a message that it should be okay.
All right. So that's leadership. What about safety? Well, where are we at with safety in the industry? Well, we've tried a lot of different things. We've had legislation, we've had prescriptive legislation, now we're moving to less prescriptive legislation. We've used management systems, we've used risk assessment, then we've gone to JSAs and Take 5s, and now most recently we've looked at behavioural-based safety observations and trying to manage how people behave. But still, we haven't reached our goal of many businesses, which is zero harm. We've improved a lot, there's no doubt about that, but we've still got some way to go, and we're still trying to figure out what the next step is. These guys did a study a few years ago now. They looked over 5 years, and what they did was they went and studied 73 different projects, safety-related projects, and to see how those projects performed and what the benefits of them were. Out of those projects, what they found was that they all worked, and that there was, but that there was a significant discrepancies in how well they worked. And basically what they found was that the mechanism was important. So the type of project you were doing, whether it's take fires or behaviour-based safety, was important, but that there was something more important underlying all that that made the biggest difference. And this is what they found. They found that the most important factor that was involved in the success of safety initiatives or safety programs was the quality of leadership that those programs were given. VST, a big company that specialises in behavioural-based safety, they did a similar study. They identified these 9 things that lead to better performance of safety initiatives, and in particular their safe behaviour programs. And out of those 9, 7 of them, the ones in red, are related to teamwork and related to leadership.